Hello and welcome, folks, to another episode of a Bunch of Punts podcast. I'm your host, Lewis, and I'm joined by the rest of the gang to give you a reaction to the first round of the NFL draft. Boys, how was draft night for you all?
Amazing. Long, tiring, but we got there.
I slept through it, mate. I tried to stay up and then just watched it back in the morning. So
we're hardcore, me and Danny. We stayed up for it.
I'm just getting old, mate. I'm just getting old. A couple of years ago, I'd have been fine, but no now.
To be fair, mate, if the Steelers had 2 top 10 picks, I'm no doubt that would carry your food. So
listen, it feels like we might have had 2 top 10 picks for the
you
draft.
You keep saying
results,
the Steelers won the draft, mate, but I'm not convinced. So I'm interested to hear why that is later.
Absolutely, no, brilliant. Like you say, a really interesting one there as well. Draft was kind of going along pretty swimmingly, wasn't it? And then it kind of blew up, and we'll come on to that very shortly. But first and foremost, we wanted to cover off a bit of news as always. Again, we spoke last week about the wide receiver market and how that was going to be affected by some of the deals that were going out there as well. AJ Brown has since been paid by the Eagles. Smithy, I think I came to you last week, so I'll come to you again here, mate. We've kind of said, look, if Devonta Smith getting paid, does that kind of set the tone for the market? Are we going to see these wide receivers start to get big money? He wasn't, or he isn't currently wide receiver number one in our opinion for the Philadelphia Eagles, but they've now paid wide receiver one in terms of AJ Brown. So I think that was $96 million over a 3-year extension. So what's your thoughts first and foremost on that?
Yeah, it's good money. I think it's good business from the Eagles, isn't it? You know, like you don't want to run the risk of having any sort of controversy over the off season and issues and players holding out and this, that, and the other. And they're both talented players. They both deserve to get paid. And I think it's a great move. I mean, the Eagles GM, he knows what he's doing, doesn't he? He's had a good draft as well. So no surprise for me. Glad they've got it done. I think it shows a standard for how you should conduct business within your team. And you know, good luck to them. Both got good money and very, very good players. So you want to lock down your best players, don't you?
Yeah, it's definitely a talented wide receiver tandem out there in Philadelphia. Another wide receiver that's been paid, Danzo, Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously T's and P's to him. He was the top dog in my fantasy winning season. Great pick late on. But he's been paid $120 million over a 4-year deal. We're not sure how much of that's guaranteed. I think it's rumoured to be around 77 million. But they've also paid Perry Sewell as well. So again, another team kind of getting out early and paying their stars. What's your thoughts on those two dudes getting big money?
Yeah, it's good. I think pretty much the same as what Smithy says. I think for the Lions, it's some good business getting the big stars locked down early. For St. Brown, great money. He was due that deal. He's put the work in. He's had the performances to back up his hard work as well. So yeah, glad he's got the deal. And like we said with Smith, it's going to set a tone for the rest of the wide receiver market, and it's starting to show that that's the case. The guys that are there on the edge of that elite band are starting to get their money and can push through now and maybe become major stars in the league.
And John, the guys that have not been paid yet, they must be sitting back, feet up, rubbing their hands. They must be thinking, I'm due something really, really, really big here. You've still got the likes of Brandon Ayuk that's been rumoured to be interested in a move to the Steelers. What's your thoughts on those guys? What's your thinking there?
Yeah, I think there's been a precedent set here, isn't there, in terms of some of the big checks that have been handed out to some even WR2s as well, in terms of some of the contracts that have been there. In terms of the Steelers, mate, I keep getting caught with all these rumours that are going on in social media and getting quite excited about it, waking up in the morning and nothing's happened. I think they're just using it as bait at the moment to try and get their own deals up. And maybe some of their clubs are actually saying, go on then, go and see if you actually want to go to the Steelers and testing their resolve that way around. So yeah, let's see what happens. I'd absolutely love it. Some of the names that are getting thrown about would be fantastic, take us to a whole new level if any of them landed in our door. But I think everyone's just trying to kind of play their hand right, get paid, and then settle into the season with their teams. So we'll see what happens.
suppose the consensus for us as a podcast is we want to see these stars get paid, don't we? We want to see these guys get their money and get their bag when they deserve it. It's very much a what have you done for this league for these guys, unfortunately. And when it comes to that, probably brings us on nicely to Zeke going back to the Cowboys when it comes to kind of what have you done for us. He's ended up back there. Leave that pretty open. Anyone want to pick up Zeke going back to the Cowboys? Any thoughts?
Oh, I think if he was going to go anywhere after last year, it was going to be the Cowboys. They needed running backs. They're in dire need of running backs. So it's a simple fit. He knows how they play. He knows the offense. So yeah, he should just get in and be on his heels right off the bat. Where his performance level is, I don't know. I don't think he's the player he was 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, we'll see how he goes on. But it was an easy fit for them.
It'll be interesting to see how the Cowboys fans feel about it. Because the first time I watched one of the, obviously you know I get into the NFL watching the social media the Netflix programs and on-demand programs, and they did one on the Cowboys, All or Nothing, and the Cowboys backed him, didn't they, when he had a wee bit of legal trouble? And I don't know, maybe just comparing it to soccer back in the UK, you back someone and then they go and move on. You welcome them back with open arms. So it's an interesting one. I know it's a need area for them, but maybe a little bit, if it happened to me, I'd feel a wee bit of loyalty being challenged there with his move. But there we go.
I mean, they've still got, they've obviously lost Tony Pollard, who was kind of star, not last season, but the season before, again, another guy that absolutely run all of the top of defences to get me a fantasy football championship. But you just wonder, is it enough in that backfield? I know they've got talent in the wide receiver areas with CD Lamb, but sometimes this is the problem with paying your stars, and you've got Dak to pay and you've got CD to pay. Some other areas need to take a hit in terms of the quality and salary cap there as well. Again, Dak, another quarterback that's looking to be paid, but one that's not been paid at the moment, and maybe will do is Trevor Lawrence, the Jags. Smithy, they've only picked up his 5th-year option. I think when we spoke about this personally or off camera, we weren't overly surprised by that, but again, probably another disappointment for Trevor Lawrence so far in terms of the career or his career in the NFL.
Yeah, I think he's had a bit of an inconsistent sort of period, hasn't he? And not perhaps lived up to the hype that he was going to come out of when he came out of college. But first year wasn't great with the madman in charge there. His second season was good, got to the playoffs, won their game. Then last year didn't quite hit the heights. I know he's obviously been injured, hasn't he, as well? But I'd still expect them to get a deal done. I think maybe the 5th-year option is a bit of insurance for them if they can't get it done over, the off season. He ends up starting the season playing as he is. Then they do have that insurance of just the 5th year. But it's a big year for him. They've done well in the off season, haven't they? They've added some pieces. Certainly some speedsters in the wide receiver position. So. We'll see what happens for him, but I would expect to get a deal done. Like, are the Jags going to get any better than Trevor Lawrence? He's still a talented quarterback, and maybe he's not going to be top 3. But if he's sitting in that sort of top 10 to top 12 range, then that's probably someone you want to keep around. So I do expect him to get paid.
I think it's one of those ones where, again, it's getting that balance right. There's a guy there that came out of college, a generational talent. Everyone wants him. His pro day was unbelievable. I mean, the amount of media coverage that it got. If you think back to him coming out of college there as well, he's the only guy from that class, isn't he? That's still with the team that drafted them. But it's getting that balance right. It's a guy that's had a few injuries now. It's a guy that's maybe not hit the heights. But again, it's one there that's shown flashes of talent, and maybe he just needs some more talent around him. I know Calvin Ridley was touted as the saviour there when he went to Jacksonville, but again, it didn't really work out there as well. So it'll be interested to see how that one goes. I pretty much agree with you. I think it's maybe kind of hedging their bets there to kind of get a deal in place so that they're not overly worried about losing them, and then maybe come to some sort of agreement to try and help the team and to help Trevor Lawrence as well when it comes to
It'd be an interesting one. Like if they, let's say, shopped him, how many teams do you think would be in for handing out draft capital to to try and take on Trevor Lawrence? Like, is he going to have a market that you think he would do, or would it be a bit like, I don't know, bearing in mind that Lamar Jackson was up for grabs for 3 first-round picks only last year and nobody wanted him, apparently.
Yeah.
You know, so you just kind of think if they did sort of shop him, would people be jumping to take on Trevor Lawrence? I don't know if that says everything about him or not, but
I'd take him at the Saints in a heartbeat.
yeah, I'm not surprised, to be fair.
To be fair, but listen, we'll come up to that a wee bit later as well with maybe some of the later rounds that have kind of caught our eye. But there's a new quarterback in town for the Saints there as well. But no, it's interesting. But again, it's not as simple as just giving up the draft capital, is it? It's about paying the guy as well.
Yeah,
it's about
exactly.
how do you find the budget for him? Because that was probably Lamar's issue, wasn't it? I mean, the guy deserved to be paid. He's won multiple MVPs now. The Ravens were probably the best team last season when you look at it across the board. Obviously, didn't get it done, but an interesting one. Before we jump into our kind of full-on draft reaction, Smithy, you've been asked to be called a social media expert, so I'm going to hand off to you to kind of introduce the socials and tell the folks where they can find us.
Yeah, no, thanks for that very nice introduction there, Lewis. It's growing every week, this title, but no, look, I think I just want to sort of say big thank you to everybody who's been engaging us ever since we started, really. You know, listeners and followers are growing across all channels. Subscribers on YouTube, likes on Instagram and TikTok. People are engaging in the comments, we're engaging back, and that's obviously what we want to do, isn't it? Drive up our audience, drive up our community, and engage as many people as possible. So thanks to everybody who's listened to us so far at the moment. Just as a reminder as to where you can find us, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, and we're also on YouTube for people, those who like to watch things via that. And just ask for you to just rate the shows on all the platforms, really. Like and subscribe. It'd be great to have some comments and give us some sort of feedback on what you've enjoyed from the show as well, so we can improve things if we've got things to improve. And then just be sure to check out TikTok and Instagram for both of those, as we put out some really cool content, some debates on some things that are going on in the league, and just keep you entertained in between shows, really. And the handles for those will be on the screen. But it's at A Bunch of Punts on TikTok and at A Bunch of Punts podcast on Instagram.
No, I'd echo that as well. I really enjoyed seeing some of the comments calling us out on mental draft picks, i.e. John. Again, Smithy getting in touch, talking about your Bears, and Danzo, you've had some good comments here as well, and I'm sure there'll be people pulling up my draft as well. But again, brings us nicely on. I don't think there's going to be any NFL GMs worried for their jobs when it came to our first round mock drafts. Again, just open that up. That's the kind of first time I've ever done anything like that. I've always kind of mocked the kind of who the Packers were looking to take, or given an opinion amongst ourselves in terms of, I think this quarterback will go first, second, whoever. But that's the first time I've kind of put a full draft piece together. It's not easy trying to take into account all the moving pieces on that, and again, you can get carried away with the amount of trades that you think are going to be made or who's going to go there. But before we kind of get into it, hats off to you, John, as well. As much as you had some mental picks in there, you seem to have came out and top with 6 out of 10 in terms of correct picks there as well. So brilliant. But again, what was your kind of thoughts just on that process and putting together your own one? How did you enjoy that?
I thought it was really cool, mate. Like, I found it's been a really good way of getting excited for the season ahead. I hadn't watched a hell of a lot of college football, but obviously you'd asked me to do this for the podcast. And I did, after pick 20, I kind of just started to see who was there and pick whoever was the best on the board without overanalyzing it. So fair play to some of the guys calling it out on social media. But no, look, it's opened up my eyes to the talent that's coming into the league this season, and really got me to look at those individual players to a level I never would have before. I'd have probably just glanced at it, thought that guy looks good, he sounds exciting. The Bears look as if they've done all right, but they'll probably bugger it up some way in the next few weeks. But I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a good thing to do. And I will see how it all plays out now.
Yeah, I've done it before. I looked at it last year. I think, like, for me, because the Bears have been heavily involved in the top 10 the last sort of couple of years or so, you get to know the talent that's going to potentially be on the board in the top 15, the top tackles, the top wide receivers. So that sort of part of the process was pretty cool this year to be able to sort of map those out. But it's so challenging when you get past top 15 players and you start looking at these players. Your knowledge levels have got to be through the roof to understand every team's needs and that type of stuff. And like, we don't claim to be experts. We have fun with it, don't we? But these people who, like, Daniel Jeremiah and all the others who do like 3-round mock drafts and four of them each time. It's really impressive stuff, the knowledge levels, really. But it's good fun, isn't it?
Danzo, what about you, mate? You must have been intrigued to see who the Saints were going to go for.
I was, way down in 14th. Took us a while to get there. Yeah, it was good. It was pretty obvious for us we were going to take a tackle. It was just which one was going to fall to us at that point. I think with the way the draft went, we ended up with a good one. So yeah, it was a good night. The mock draft, it was tough to do. It's the first time I've done one not looking specifically at a team myself. And like you say, having the limited information, you can only do so much. So I think getting 4 out of 10 is actually decent, given we were pretty much stamped on the first 4 anyway. So yeah, we done all right.
Let's get into it then, Smithy. Again, your Bears picked first this year. More and more looking like a really, really great trade from Ryan Poles, especially the way the top 10 finished up. But I'll give you your 10-20 minutes to turn this into a Bears podcast as usual.
I think that trade's going to go down with one of the best trades in history when it all pans out. When we're sitting there with 3 or 4 Super Bowls in 3 or 4 years. Now, look, the Bears, obviously, I don't want to get too carried away and too excited because you just don't know what's going to say, but I will say this. The Bears are back, baby. We are back. Like, Ryan Poles has been cooking. So I'm really pleased. Caleb Williams, I think it's one of those, like, I knew the pick was coming. Everyone knew the pick was coming. But I was still really excited about it. And, you hear all these stories about him putting an Eli Manning and this, that, and the other, but all the sort of post-draft stuff that you've seen him in his interviews where he's turned up at Hallis Hall, and he generally looks really, really pumped to be a Bear. Like, he looks proud to be a Bear. And obviously they've done a great job to give him a very good starting position, haven't they, with what they've surrounded him with. But like I said, you knew it was coming. The excitement one for me was what the Bears did after that at number 9, because that's something that you didn't know was going to happen, and a lot of pieces had to fall for that to happen. But that could end up being probably the best 1-2 punch in the draft for a long, long time, with Rome Odunze falling to 9. But just unbelievable talent to pair together. And I can honestly tell you how excited and pumped I was when that managed to come off at 9.
I think again, when waking up and seeing the picks, and I know you were buzzing that we called you greedy last week in terms of hoping that Rome Odunze was going to fall to your Bears. I mean, we've kind of given our opinion on him last week as well. A really tough wide receiver. Looks like he was really pumped to be joining Caleb Williams in terms of some of the snippets that we see coming out of the draft there as well. But it was probably the pick before Rome Odunze that seen the draft kind of explode. Danzo, the Atlanta Falcons are in your division. They've went and taken a quarterback, Michael Penix Jr. at number 8. Before I asked your opinion on it, I did send in that I fancied the Falcons to take another quarterback. I did bet it to be JJ McCarthy. So I think there was some sentiment that they were going to take a quarterback. But were you surprised by that? Do you feel it's a bit of a reach for the Falcons in that regard?
It's definitely a reach for that player, yes. I think you probably could have picked him up a little later in the draft. First round, but let's say kind of 15, round about the 15 mark, I think you could have got him. Looking back on it now, at the time I was shocked. Shocked with who they picked and shocked that they went QB with what was on the board. But looking back on it now, I think they've done a good thing to protect their franchise for the next few years at quarterback. I think it'll be certainly it's Kirk's season, definitely. Probably 2 seasons. He'll have Penix coming in. Kirk's coming back from this injury as well, so it gives him a bit of cover that way. I think Penix, he's got a good arm on him. He does the business. I think his completion rate in college was around about the 70% mark as well. So he's making his throws. So he's a good pick for them there. And like I say, he secures it for the next 4 or 5 years at QB for the Falcons. So it definitely worked out for them.
I think it's madness.
Oh, go then, Smithy, you jump ahead. On you go, crack
No,
on, mate.
sorry, I don't mean to jump ahead of John, mate. You go for it, pal.
I mean, I'm
Before you steal my points, go for it, John.
no worries, mate. I'll just see what you said in the group chat and just repeat that, right? No, I'm just going to agree with Danny, actually. It felt sort of like a strange pick at the time. Like, when I looked at it in the morning, I thought, that's strange, like, especially with the talent that was on the board. Roma Dunze being one of the options for him there as well. But I just think Kirk Cousins obviously coming back for an injury. The Falcons not had a great season last year. Fans are suffering out there a little bit. And I think, what if he comes back and he's not back to his full strength? What if he's not as good as what he was? There was some things on social media around about Penix Jr.'s age, which I think they kind of slightly over-exaggerated. I don't think he's as old as what people were suggesting. So, guys, it's plenty of time left in his career. He can, quarterbacks can play right up to their late 30s, early 40s nowadays as well. And he's going to come in and sit behind in my opinion, a great professional. A guy that's probably great to learn from, So I think it makes sense as well. I think it's a good pick. I think they are kind of future-proofing their season. So preempting the possibility that Kirk Cousins doesn't come back as strong, and then putting a decent quarterback in their roster that can actually step up either, now that in terms of this season, if it doesn't work out for Cousins, and we've seen quarterbacks move around the league and that next club isn't their best, Russell Wilson going to the Broncos is probably an example of that as well. So I think it's a sensible move. I think it's a safe move for them. And then they've also got that opportunity to actually bring him in a couple of years' time once Kirk's had his success, and then take over. So that's my thoughts on it, Smithy.
I disagree with both you boys. I think it doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't matter whether it's a week after the draft or 2 weeks after. I don't think it's going to make sense to me. Like, personally, you've invested heavily in Kirk Cousins, $100 million. Yes, his injury concerns, is he going to be the same player? But surely you've had eyes on that medical. You're not investing that money unless you know that he's going to be your guy for 2 years. And I get future proofing. The talent coming out next year isn't going to be as good. The Falcons probably don't think they're going to be picking this high, so maybe that makes sense in that sense. But he's ready to play now, I think. Penix Jr. Does he want to sit? He's probably not very happy the fact that he could be sitting for 2 years. And the other thing about it is, I don't know if he fits their current offense in terms of how they play. Like, the Falcons do play the quick game. They a lot of slants, a lot of screens, a lot of boots. And if you watch Michael Penix Jr. in college, that's not his game. He's driving that ball down the field. He's hitting outside the numbers and making big game hunter as well. And that doesn't quite match up. And I probably would have thought, to your point, Lewis, JJ McCarthy might have been the developmental QB to take in that situation, considering how he ran the offense in Michigan, and perhaps that might suit the Falcons a bit more. So I struggle to see it making sense personally, and going back to Albert at pick 10, that would be something the Bears would do. Like, the Bears would do something wrong and not take the obvious pick and go to pick a defensive. And now we've got a new regime, and it's just ironic that the guy that we had before, who probably would have overthink it and try and take a defensive tackle, is now at the Falcons, and he's part of that decision making where they're taking on a quarterback. Similar to what the Bears did when they signed like Nick Foles and they signed Andy Dalton and then went and drafted a QB. It just doesn't work out very well. So I don't know. I don't know if it makes sense. Maybe they shop one of them in 12 months' time. Maybe that's something they look to trade, either Kirk or whatever. But I don't think it's quite as sensible as that. But I don't know. We'll see.
I think I agree with all three of you in some sense of the case. I think it is hard to criticise franchises for trying to future-proof. I think we've seen it with Green Bay. I've loved it as a fan, and you're thinking, give Aaron Rodgers a weapon. He's on the Pat McAfee show begging for a wide receiver here. Give him something. We're this close to get into a Super Bowl. with an excellent team, and then you go and draft his replacement. And listen, it set a fire underneath Aaron Rodgers. He went and won MVP. So there's some option there. I think that obviously it was widely touted or been widely spoken about that Kirk Cousins didn't know until minutes before the pick was actually going to be made. I don't think that again there's a great time to tell your quarterback or the franchise quarterback that you're going to draft his replacement. I think, John, to your point, he's came across really well in the kind of quarterback series, and that he is a kind of consummate professional, and maybe he is the guy. He's got the personality that he's going to bring Michael Penix on and support him in terms of being a quarterback, because regardless of what you think of Kirk Cousins, he's been in the league, he's had a successful career, he's been paid a lot of money. But the more you look at that deal, and that's the reason why I thought they'd maybe go for JJ McCarthy, was they can get out of that deal after 2 years. It's a very low hit to the franchise in terms of what they've paid him. But it's the Green Bay model, and I think they've quoted that as well. It's getting a guy in there that's maybe still raw, but he's got the tools there. Sit him, don't put the pressure on these guys. I mean, that, like you say again, they're still very young in terms of how long they can play in this league, especially if you're talented. And I think there's a few things to like about it. Again, though, it's hard to explain to the guy that you've just paid £100 million guaranteed, $100 million guaranteed, that you're not getting help for him and the team right now, in this day and age, because they've got everything on offense, really, isn't they? They've got talented wide receivers in Drake London, and hopefully Kyle Pitts gets some targets since he's given up the number 8 jersey to Kirko Chains. Bijan Robinson, I mean, I've watched him against the Packers and he absolutely runs into the ground. But it's hard. It must be a hard conversation to go back to your quarterback and say, look, we're drafting your replacement, we've just paid you, we're not getting you help right away this year. But it's to your point, when we spoke about Matt Ryan last week, this is a franchise that's been in quarterback purgatory for so long now. Again, it was talented quarterback play that probably kept him out of the playoffs there as well. And there's a number of teams around the league. And again, to your point, Smithy, with Kirk Cousins, they're probably not going to be picking in the top 10 with the talent they've got on offense.
I just thought about, literally, as you were talking there, Lewis, is that there's talk about them being stripped of draft capital, isn't there, following the tampering? And maybe that's what they're thinking. Are they thinking, like, we're not going to have a first round pick next year because that could be the likely punishment that they get for the tampering, and maybe that's why they're taking a QB now.
Yeah,
and probably there was a lot of pressure. Raiders, Seahawks are all sort of sniffing around him, and they thought maybe we're going to take him there. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I think the other thing with it is you talked about the Green Bay model, Lewis, and the fact that they've done that a few times, haven't they? They've got the next guy in and he's learned and he's came in and he's taken over eventually. If you look at the Steelers with Big Ben, we never did that. And we got Mason Rudolph in for a few years, but he was a light round pick. Just wonder if Kenny Pickett would have turned out more successful if we'd got him in a couple of years before Big Ben moved on and learned from a professional.
I mean, it's such a step up, isn't it? It's such a step up for these guys coming out of college where the game is simplified, and you've had Tom Brady on podcasts talking about it, Aaron Rodgers talking about Dak Prescott last year and the kind of leap he made in terms of actually running the offense and making changes at the line of scrimmage, whether that's pass protection or run blocking or changing the play. These guys need time to learn that. It must be so difficult for these guys to drop into a new city, new place, new teammates, and a new playbook landed on your desk and say, right, go and do it for 17 or 18 Sundays out of the year and then get us to the Super Bowl. It must be so challenging there as well. But again, I think I actually said this to you at the time when the Packers picked Jordan Love. Smithy, quarterbacks in the first round have always carry a bit of draft capital. You've still got something there if you want to trade him for a first rounder potentially next year, or to give someone a QB if they've not got one there as well. It is something that you can hold. So that's the type of insight that you want to join a bunch of punts for. Smithy thinking on his feet, coming out with some really insightful points there as well. After that then, like I say, John, probably coming back to you, you were the only one that kind of took Joe Alt going to the Chargers, mate, so kudos there. I think I kind of had Sandra Bullock's boy going to the Tennessee Titans, but what was your thinking there when you were thinking about Joe Alt going to the Chargers for Justin Herbert, giving him some peace of mind?
I think just in terms of like looking at a few different draft simulators and mock drafts for different websites, obviously that's where I got most of my kind of insight in. I didn't watch a lot of college football last year, so I was relying on a lot of commentators when I did that mock draft. But obviously one of the big things was Jim Harbaugh and his run game, and how they thought that actually a big offensive tackle could come in and help support that. So that was the reason why I picked him in there, and I think that's probably why I got 6 overall, because once you make that first mistake, it throws everything out of sync, doesn't it? So I'm claiming that being the key piece in my success.
I think you're right. I think obviously Smithy, that's a point you made as well. Thinking about how key Joe Alt was for Notre Dame in terms of how they run the ball, as well last season, and how much Jim Harbaugh wants to do that or did do it at Michigan. Again, the Vikings taking JJ McCarthy. And what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts there?
So I think that was always on the cards. You have to give them credit for just holding their nerve on that one, because they must have had trade conversations about moving up to 3 or 4, or to try and get maybe ahead of the Giants, because there was possibly some talk of them taking him, but they didn't. They held their nerve and let the draft come to them, and then obviously they moved up one position, didn't they? Which made sense to go get him. I still think he's. I can't work out whether he is going to be a bit like a Brock Purdy, right? Coming into that Shanahan style offense, and probably be slightly better than Purdy, or whether he's just a mobile Mac Jones. I can't work it out with him, because his sample size from college is very limited because of what he was asked to do there. I think he threw the ball about 12 to 15 times a game. And sometimes he didn't even do it at all in the fourth quarter. So, but he is talented, and we've talked about before about it being so important, their landing spots in terms of where they're going, and they've got some nice pieces there. You know, he's got a couple of good wideouts and one absolute weapon in JJ as well. TJ Hawkinson, Aaron Jones is there obviously as well now. So they've got some nice pieces for him to work. Now, whether he sits the full season, maybe this is another example of a rookie sitting behind Sam Darnold. But it's Sam Darnold. Like, he's one bad game, and they're going to be clambering for JJ to come in and save him. So I think it's an interesting one with the Vikings, because they've slowly kind of gone around their business of not doing like a full rebuild and stripping it down, etc. They've kind of wanted to be this competitive sort of part rebuild type thing, and they've got themselves a position now where they could be shaping up for the future. I still got some question marks about JJ. I just don't know. Like any of these quarterbacks, you don't know what's going to happen. But he at least is in a good position in terms of what he's got around him, and a great coach, and they've got a solid defense as well. So the North is going to be absolute source next year.
That was going to be my point, Nate, because to stick with you for a wee second, because we're both in that division. The NFC North has quickly turned itself around.
Yeah,
It was potentially going to look dog shit for a while with all the moves that were being made, and I think all the teams, maybe the Lions were a bit more aggressive with it in terms of how they turned the team around, but the Packers and the Vikings have kind of done it on the fly almost, whereas obviously the Bears have been aggressive again, top 10, but it's completely turned the NFC North on its head with how that was looking. So it's certainly going to be an exciting season out there. Danzo, can you wait for Vikings commentators to be shouting JJ to JJ non-stop all season?
Oh no, we'll be watching it in mute for a while, I think, until they get it out of their system. But yeah, I think it made sense. I think he was always going to go there. Like Smithy said, it's just when they got him. They done well to hold their nerve and take him there. I was certain they were going to trade up to the top 10. They only moved up one position, so I think they done well. They did a good draft all round, and JJ I think will end up being a nice fit in there. I think he does have a bit of everything. He's used to running with a run first team, but he has the ability there, and the more he is thrown it, the better he'll get. And when you've got people like you say, like JJ Addison in there, they boys will go up and catch that ball for him, so he doesn't need to be perfect every time. So I think it's a good replace for him.
I think Aaron Jones is definitely a great add to them in the off season. They've not had to pay him an awful lot of money. But the other aspect of it is he's quarterback friendly. He can catch the ball out of the backfield as well, and it's someone that you can probably trust. And probably what the Vikings didn't have last year at running back in terms of being able to trust someone to run the ball and be quality with it. And probably the next two picks in, John, if you're thinking about the Jets, obviously they traded back with the Vikings to allow them to go and get their quarterback. They went for Fashanu there as well, offensive tackle, and then Bo Nix at the Broncos. What's your thoughts on those two picks in terms of what that means for Aaron Rodgers in terms of the Jets taking offensive tackle, and then also the Broncos going taking a quarterback when they've got the housewife's favourite Zach Wilson there?
I was surprised that the Jets didn't take Brock Bowers. I think we spoke about that, didn't we, in the last podcast? I thought that would have been a real good addition to the offense for them, and we talked about how much tight end, can make a massive difference to a team that want to go all the way. So I was quite surprised at that one. Obviously, they see something in the offensive tackle that's going to add and support Aaron Rodgers. So yeah, I was just surprised that it came in there. He was a player that I was thinking for the Steelers just because it was an area that we needed to improve on. I think some of the things that I've said out is he needs to develop his pass blocking is something that I've heard for this guy. So I don't know whether or not that's a key benefit for Rodgers. Maybe I misheard that at some point in time, but I'm pretty sure I picked that up in some of the stuff that was analysed after that.
I think he was probably the best offensive tackle on the board. I actually thought he was going to land at the Saints with the way the picks. I kind of anticipated the picks, but yeah, he's probably, if not the best, second best in there. So he may have stuff to improve on, but I don't think that'll be a problem. And it's a massive coup for the Jets, I think, and giving Rodgers the protection he needs.
Yeah, I think that's a key one, isn't it?
Aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And Lewis, you said it before, right? The Jets are all in this year, aren't they? Like, how long is Rodgers going to be there anymore? They've just got to keep him upright, keep him in there. He's not mobile, and has he ever been mobile? I don't know, but he's not going to be able to just sort of escape the pocket and evade that pressure. And he did that. He tried that last year and popped when his Achilles he popped, wasn't it? I think So I think that protection is massively important, and just let Aaron Rodgers do what he does, which is probably one of the best pocket passes the game's ever seen, really. So I think it makes a lot of sense, as much as Brock Bowers would be a weapon as well. But I
think it was,
can't get the ball to him; it's pointless, isn't it?
If you look at the first 11 picks, there was 3 offensive tackles, but in all of our predictions, I think we only put 1 in there, didn't we? Maybe that was just short-sightedness, and maybe we were just getting a bit excited about those big, exciting positions like a wide receiver and quarterback and stuff. But just to your point, Danny, it is such an important part of the team, isn't it, to get that line right? Not
to give ourselves more credit than we probably do here, but I think, offensive tackles are premium positions. They're guys that the run on offensive tackles here probably caused as many to go as quickly as they did. When it comes to Joe Alt, how many times do you see guys 6'9"? God knows what he weighs. Was he over 300 pounds? Is that fair to say? You've seen him getting drafted in it. You seen him getting drafted in his house, and it was like that scene from Elf, wasn't it? Where it's just like Will Ferrell and just all these other tiny wee people round about him. God doesn't make guys that big and that wide all that often. So I think probably credit with ourselves where once one of the guys goes, and then the second one goes to the Titans, because it was such a need area, wasn't it? People probably start to get nervy, and again, Smith, to your point with the Vikings kind of holding their nerve, because probably worked in their favour. They end up with getting their quarterback and then getting Dallas Turner as well, who was someone that was projected to go potentially top 10. But again, it's about maybe if they've got better O-line cover. The Jets last season don't have Aaron Rodgers scrambling about 4 plays into his career and his Achilles goes. So his Jets career, sorry, and his Achilles goes. What's everyone's thoughts on Bo Nix? Ended up with Sean Payton, Zach Wilson, and going to the Broncos in those horrendous uniforms.
Yeah, I think the Falcons have got the Broncos off the hook with this one, because it's madness for me. If we've mentioned around the Falcons taking Michael Penix Jr. because of the pressure of other teams taking him, I don't think anybody was bothered about taking Bo Nix. Was it 12 he went?
Yeah.
It was 12, yeah.
Yeah, 12, yeah.
The Vikings moved up, didn't they? So that pick for me it's almost like, well, we've got to take a quarterback and we'll just take him now. But they probably could have traded back maybe even to the second round and he probably still would have been available then, considering what we've just mentioned around the tackles that have gone off the board, the defensive players start going off the board. So it doesn't really make any sense. Now, Sean Payton will make you believe that he's probably even Caleb Williams in a close 1A, 1B scenario, but like Bo Nix is, from what I saw, not great at all. It's even possible that Zach Wilson could be the better out of the two of them there. But so it just makes no sense at all. I did hear, I think it might have been around the NFL, that what made him make a decision on this, right, this is how it's so ridiculous, is that after his pro day, they got him in for a private workout and they sat him in a classroom. They gave him some offensive packages to digest, tested him on it. And then they saw him throw the ball around for an hour and a half. And that's what they made a decision on, that they were sold that he was the guy to lead the franchise forward. Now, I'm not a QB evaluator, but I would have thought anybody who's half decent is able to toss the ball around in an empty field with a couple of, open receivers and look pretty damn good for an hour and a half. So I'm not saying that's all the assessment on, but it stinks very, very similar to the Jets' approach to taking Zach Wilson last year when they fell in love with him at his pro day when he's throwing his ball around in his underwear. And guess what? He's at the same place with the Broncos. So I just think they've got off the hook with that one at all. And who knows how it's going to work out.
I think it's spot on. I think it's spot on. I think the Falcons have definitely let them off the hook with this one. I think more to that point, so you go and trade for Zach Wilson. You obviously take Bo Nix. What is he, the sixth quarterback off the board at that point?
Yeah.
So so again, you've taken the sixth quarterback. Now, by all accounts, the draft was Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May, quite a bit underneath those two. And then again, you start to think of the other guys and Penix Jr. and JJ McCarthy and all the rest of it. But you've also traded Russell Wilson to John Steelers and are going to pay a big salary for that guy. Like, where's the thinking in that? I just don't understand that. There'll be some sort of theory behind that, but why do you trade a guy that's been there, done it, as much as he's a bit weird, and let him go play for another team and don't pay, and you're going to pay him, and then you've got Zach Wilson, Bo Nix, Jared Stidham. I mean, does that quarterback from?
I think he just didn't like him. He just must not have liked Russell Wilson, because he had his own office and stuff, didn't he? Apparently there, and he's a bit, like you say, he's a bit weird on country, let's ride, and all that type of stuff. Just wearing a cup of tea, but maybe he's going to be a genius, Sean Payton. Maybe Bo Nix is going to surprise a lot of people and stuff. But it's not necessarily like the talent of him as a player. It's more so where they took him, like at 12. Like, you could have probably got him in the second round. That for me is madness, really. Considering they've got a lot of other needs as well, haven't they? The Broncos. But sorry,
maybe the only defence story, John, before you come in, is that they're maybe thinking the Seahawks are looking for a quarterback. The Raiders are potentially picking after them, and they're looking for a quarterback there as well. So there's maybe a few teams out there that are still thinking, look, we could maybe take him and sit him. But that would be my only thinking in that regard. Yeah. I just don't know why you go and let.
I think the Seahawks are probably a better run organisation than taking someone like that so high in the first round pick. The Raiders possibly could have been one, but I don't know. It's just shocking, isn't it? John, what were you going to say, mate? Sorry.
To be honest, I was going to agree with the point you made there, Smithy, around about he looks like a decent enough quarterback. Like, if you look at some of his stats, he broke I was just reading it in the ESPN there, he broke the NCAA single season record for completion percentage of 77.4%. He only threw 3 interceptions in 2023. So you look at those stats as a quarterback, that's not dreadful. But I think you're right, it's where he get picked, isn't it? It's coming in at 12, where they could have used that with some better players still on the board and took those options instead. So it is an interesting one. Guy that could very well start quite early in the season, couldn't he? Like, I don't think
it's going to be interesting. I mean, is that
behind for too long either?
Danny, I don't know what you think, mate, but is that going to be like an open competition, or is he going to come out and name Bo Nix? You know Sean Payton probably more than any of us do. What's the thinking behind the madman?
I think Zach Wilson will start. I think just with his experience in the league so far, it automatically puts him in there. But Wilson has a target in his back. I feel as though he's always had a target in his back in the league. It just takes one mistake and everybody's on his back and wanting him to do better, and the crowd's getting on him. So I don't think it'll be long before Nix gets a chance. But yeah, I think at least for the first 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to be Wilson's ball to throw.
It'd just be a case of whether he's still seeing ghosts, Wilson, or not, and whether he can get away from that and get back to it, because he throws a nice ball, to be fair, Zach Wilson, doesn't he? He's just rash and
his decision making more than anything. And I think if anybody could fix that for him, it's probably Peyton. I mean, he worked with Breeze for a long time and they had a great relationship, and Breeze wasn't without his issues as well. He was arm strength and that, and they kind of changed the way they played to try and get Breeze more involved and more efficient in that. So maybe he can find something for Wilson in there with the way they play. But yeah, it's going to be a tough season for them all in, I think, this year.
Yeah, just look at the rest of their draft, and they actually didn't take anybody to protect quarterbacks at all. An edge, a running back, a centre, to be fair, but in the 7th round. So like he's very unlikely to see the field this year, isn't he? And they did take Troy Franklin, Bo Nix's wide receiver from Oregon as well. So maybe it's not quite Caleb Williams, Roma Dunze, but maybe that is like a partnership that they're thinking there. So interesting.
It's one of the key points about him there on that analysis is apparently one of his key strengths is his ability to extend plays. So to your point there about Zach Wilson, panicking, as you say, Smithy seeing ghosts, is someone to come in and complement that, isn't it? If that's a strength that's the opposite of Wilson. In that sense, I wonder if Wilson was made aware that that's what they were looking at any stage in the draft. Like you were going to pick someone else up.
He's been there literally a week, and they're ringing him up saying, "Oh, we're taking someone else," and he's like, "I'm just here for the mums."
There goes the Denver Broncos couldn't say it right. No, brilliant. Again, the next one for me, Brock Bowers, a little bit of an interesting one. Going out to the Raiders, I was quite surprised by that myself. I don't know how many targets he does get with Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, but we talk about generational talents all the time, but he is the clear number one tight end in the draft, and how that can transform your offense. The Raiders, again, which I was quite surprised about, took Michael Mayer from Notre Dame last year as well, who was again the best tight end in that draft, but very different the more I look at it, in terms of probably you could see a lot of their offense with both of those guys actually in the lineup there as well, and in terms of Bowers being kind of more the kind of Kelsey pass catcher, a little bit more dynamic maybe than Travis Kelsey in terms of the kind of the speed and the agility. But I mean, we know he's getting on a bit, although the Chiefs have extended him as well, haven't they? They've made sure Bile Trav's been looked after. Danny, if we come to yourself, obviously the Saints went and taken a tackle from Oregon as well. So talk me through your thoughts on the Saints and their pick.
It was needed. Fraga was needed. The tackle was needed. There's a lot of positions needed at the Saints right now, but I think overall we done okay. Getting Kool-Aid in, we needed that cornerback. We've got a few players in that kind of position, the secondary, that have been there a while, picking up injuries, and our defensive line as well is the same. So I think it probably is the right time to give it a freshen up, but try not lose some of the quality, because that's a lot of what our football's based on, is defensive first. We've always been strong with your players in there. So yeah, I think it was good. Getting Rattler in was kind of interesting, though. I didn't really see that one coming. I mean, I'm not Carr's biggest fan, but he's a suitable NFL quarterback. Do you know what I mean? So having somebody in there that can maybe push him a wee bit to start to chap at the door and say, "Listen, I'm here. I'm after your position." It might not be the worst thing for him, and hopefully we can get him spraying the balls about again. But looking at that, it's only really a Lavi that's there to be catching the ball, I think, of any real quality. So, but I think overall, decent draft. we didn't have as much capital as we would have liked. 3 in the 5th round, and then you're on 6 and 7 after that, after your first 2 picks. So it was always going to be tough for us.
I think obviously first and foremost, I mean Devontae Adams couldn't even make Derek Carr look good, so I'll take offence to that in terms of him being a good quarterback. I think obviously myself and Smithy have seen quite a bit of Spencer Rattler in terms of some of the kind of QB1 series and whatnot. So Smithy, I've been talking too much recently. I'll hand over to you and you can give your 2 cents on Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, I think it's done a lot of damage being on that programme because he doesn't come across at all well in terms of leadership, being a teammate, his attitude, his maturity. But he was 17. I don't know how old he is coming out now. Is it got to be like 22 or something? Is he 21, 22 maybe? 23, so he's almost 24, right? So you imagine he's done a lot of maturing since then. But he's a talented quarterback. Like, he was sort of talked about as being, QB1 at one stage. Certainly when he was at Oklahoma and, Caleb Williams come out and beat him out of the job and stuff. But he's a talented quarterback. Great arm talent. He's not short of self-confidence. You'd hope he's got the right sort of working habits. And maybe that might just sort of win him a job at some sort of stage. Maybe Carr gets injured, he comes in and then he takes his chance there. But I think, like, going back to what the Broncos have done in terms of reaching at 12 for Bo Nix, the Saints have done the absolute right thing in terms of just letting the draft fall to them and then taking a QB at the right sort of place, which feels kind of right for the player he is. And maybe then he gets in the facility and they coach him up and he's well looked after and maybe he'll get a shot at some sort of stage. But yeah, I just think he's probably harshly dealt, really, following the program that he was on. And he's obviously had a chance to go through the interview process, hasn't he? And perhaps that's swayed a few people, but we'll shall see. It's nice to have some competition in the building, like Carl, like, to your point, Danny, like he needs to kick up the arse, doesn't he? You need competition in there, and a young, hungry, point-to-prove quarterback with a bit of talent behind him. He's only got to launch one ball down to Devontae Adams, and he's going to be like, "Hello, this guy's got an arm." Maybe you might start championing for him to get on the field a little bit more.
Absolutely. I hopefully Devontae Adams doesn't get faded to the Saints late enough and come back to the NFC. But no.
Oh yeah.
I've done a Burnsy.
We'll cut that out. Now, John brings it on nicely. Obviously for yourself and the Steelers. Again, picking at pick 20, was it?
Yeah, we got pick 20 in the draft. I think we were highly touted as being a team that would trade up just because of our needs and the fact that we look as if we've got a bit of a hole in the wide receiver area. Overall, which obviously we picked Troy Fatanu at pick 20, so he's a left tackle on the offensive line. Guy looks tremendous. He looks really good. Hadn't watched a lot of his tape. I'd seen offensive tackle being one of the potential positions that we would go for, and his name get floated about, but hadn't really done much more after that. So yeah, absolutely buzzing that we got him. And then when you actually watch some of his tape back, the guy looks tremendous. He looks elite. I think he's going to be really, really good for us. We've got last year's first round pick, Broderick Jones, who will sit in right tackle. And there was a debate because we had such a hole in the left tackle. Could we move him over and bring a right tackle in? But to actually get that left tackle position sorted out was really, really good. And then the guy's a Steelers fan, so all over the social media the day after the draft, you've got pictures with him with his Steelers top on when he was a wee guy, and getting old players on his back and all that kind of stuff. So I'm absolutely ecstatic about this draft. I think the Steelers have done brilliant business, and that's 2 years in a row that we've got an A+ rating in our drafts. And hopefully we've now got the offensive coordinator in place. And we'll get rid of what could have been players that, if you read some of the rumours, were maybe creating a bit of a toxic culture around about the club. And we've brought in guys that are here to fight and obviously get back to the Steelers way of doing things. And wide receiver was a position that I was hoping for, but the guy Roman Wilson as a slot receiver. I think he replaces what we had in Deontay Johnson. Don't know if he's much better than him, but he certainly replaces him. And you've all heard my shout about George Pickens being, one of the surprise packages this year for us as a whole. And then, sorry, I'm in round 2 and 3 and already here, Lewis, right? But this draft is brilliant for us. Every single one of our draft picks were projected to go a decent bit ahead of where we eventually picked them up, and we didn't have to trade at all.
I think that's why Steelers had such a good draft, because they have got value right through the draft, I think, for the players that they've got, and that's why it'll look so good for them going forward.
Defo. And then the last wee thing, last piece of the jigsaw, if we can get someone in, is if we do get that big superstar wide receiver in, one of these guys that can't get their contract sorted out, then I will, I think maybe be meeting Smithy around about February time, when because I think we will be up there and amongst the top teams in the AFC.
Oh, some bold predictions this year already.
Still got to sort that quarterback position.
Second episode in, we've got the Steelers, Bears, Super Bowl.
I know.
We'll see. No, like I say, again, the kind of draft just kind of carried on. A lot of teams getting some really good picks. Obviously, Chop Robinson going to the Dolphins, Kenny Mitchell going to the Eagles. I think was a really good pick for them. A guy I'd like to have seen at the Packers alongside Cooper DeJean, who went later to the Philadelphia Eagles. Brian Thomas Jr., to Smithy's point, they obviously give a monster weapon at wide receiver there, a guy that was still widely touted as being real quality. Again, going in the first round. Terry and Arnold, obviously the Lions then trade up to go ahead of the Packers and take a cornerback there as well. A guy that's, again, a massive steal in terms of around the draft, wasn't it, in terms of where he actually went there as well. And then, again, the Packers go and take Jordan Morgan from Arizona. So I'll be honest, I was a little bit underwhelmed when I seen that in the morning. I think when you look through the draft and you're seeing guys like kind of Mitchell and Terry and Arnold going so late, and again, it's the way the draft plays out, isn't it? Some teams have got different strategies where they want to fill a need. Some teams I'll just go, look, we want the best player on the board and the best player available at that point. But I think the more I've read about the pick, the more I've spent a bit of time on it. It looks to be the kind of the Packers and what the Packers have done well in terms of where they pick. I think
what about the rest of their picks, Lewis? Because it seems like they've just plucked a lot of safeties, a lot of linebackers.
I think it's quite widely known that was a problem for us last season in terms of across the middle of the field. Javon McKinney solves that, in my opinion. Again, they've went and got Bullard and Cooper. Again, safeties and guys that are going to linebackers there as well. So I think the new defensive coordinator, Jeff Hadley, was more or less like, we need a full new room.
You've got 6 safeties.
Yeah, to make that work. So again, I when you're looking into it, there's been value in that. Obviously, cornerback very late on in terms of King, and a lot of people he was touted to go round 1 and then had a bit of a drop off season. So maybe looking at guys there with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. But kind of coming back to Jordan Morgan, I've watched the kind of Pat McAfee show, and you had Bill Belichick giving him a glowing recommendation, which he didn't do for a lot of people, which was quite interesting there as well. And I mean, you only had to see what he had to say about Drake May being compared to Josh Allen to kind of bring Drake May back to earth on draft night. But like I say, he's well equipped. He's versatile. He can play a few different positions. If you're going to play Jordan Love a lot of money, you need to give him the opportunity to protect him when you're missing probably one of the best left tackles ever in David Bakhtiari there as well. But again, key pickups across the board, addressing needs for us. So fingers crossed these guys can kind of live up to their potential. But again, in terms of offensive tackle, it was a draft that was stacked. But again, you kind of want to be picking a little bit higher in terms of some of these guys. But it's the way the board falls to you. And again, you see teams that maybe, for example, the Saints, that when you've not got that draft capital, it can make the draft really difficult. I think the Packers ended up with 13 picks, and that's the first time I've actually seen it. But there's a points board, So when you're actually trading certain picks in different rounds, the Packers actually finished even on that. So although they traded back and forward, etc., they actually finished broadly even on that there as well, which is probably makes for a good draft.
I think it's a good strategy for the Packers because they did have a lot of picks, and it's been sort of well documented that the talent in this year's draft isn't as good as some years because obviously the COVID years catching up and that type of stuff. So more picks means more throw the darts at the board, and you just never know where you're going to come from. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And going back to the North, Lewis, there's some real talented rosters in those 4 teams, isn't there? So
absolutely,
it should make for some good games.
I think for me as well, I kind of one of the takeaways I took, kind of going on that point and how they managed the draft. The Eagles had 9 trades, but a lot of their capital that they didn't take on this draft, they've took it on next year's draft. So it's like they've done the same thing. They've looked at this and goes, right, these bottom rounds aren't going to, it's not worth us taking these picks. Let's move them on to next year, see what we can pull to next year. So I think there's a few teams had the same kind of idea in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Said the same thing about the Bears. I mean, the Bears only entered the draft with 4 picks, and I was thinking, are they going to perhaps move up and use some of next year's capital to do that? And they've done the same thing, and they're thinking the next year is going to be more talent, more depth. So save your picks. They did move up late for a player, which I'll talk about in a moment if you want. But I think that's what a lot of the franchises are looking at, is going like, next year, let's save our picks.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think the only other one worth mentioning was Marlon Lloyd. Obviously the running back from USC as well. Obviously losing Aaron Jones to the Packers, which I was absolutely devastated. There was minutes of absolute elation when we had Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones in the backfield, and I thought, oh my god, we are all in here. But I think that was important as well to kind of again try and push AJ Dillon on, who's kind of is a bit part player in the offense, to be honest. And give him a little kind of boost to kind of try and move his career on, because he came back for very little money there as well. But you need to give Josh Jacobs a break as well. That's someone that's been used an awful lot in the backfield. So I mean, this guy came out and said he felt he was the best running back in the draft, and it's not a great year for running backs in the draft when you look at the quality of last year with Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, etc. But I mean, if you can get the best guy available at those positions, then that can't hurt you as well. I think kind of rounding up in terms of the kind of last few picks, I think to kind of give some insight into it, I was quite surprised that maybe the Cardinals didn't kind of try and get more draft capital for what they had, and kind of really didn't trade much in the first round. In terms of the Bills, the only thing I was going to say about the Bills is if you can't beat the Chiefs, why are you letting them trade up and take away the Chiefs?
Yeah, crazy.
Especially after what's happened before, you'd think they would have learned their lesson.
Yeah, it's a mad one, that. Unless they know something on Worthy that nobody else does. But not that they knew that was going to be the pick, but it's just
a great pick for the Chiefs, though, isn't it? Like another decent wide receiver and more to add to their offence. I
think it opens up their playbook a wee bit back to when they had Tyreek. It gives them that speed, those options, those kind of jet runs and things like that, which will open up their playbook a wee bit more.
Yeah,
it didn't work out with MVS, didn't it? Not it was too inconsistent. I mean, the guy's absolutely wicked when he opens up and he's in the open field, but it's just catching the ball and bringing it in. And I mean, you've seen it kind of late on in the season where it worked out and it didn't work out. But I mean, the Bills went and got AD Mitchell, so that obviously they were. It was AD Mitchell, wasn't it? I think.
And they got Keon Coleman.
Was it Keon Coleman? Sorry.
Keon Coleman, yeah.
So they had a wide receiver in mind that they wanted. Sorry for AD Mitchell. I know they had someone specific that they kind of wanted to go after. So maybe they're thinking that they've done the right thing there. The only other one that was kind of spoken quite about was Tyler Guyton to the Cowboys. They've got a really strange way of handling the draft. I don't know if you've seen Jerry Jones kind of blow, just kind of open out all this information about their draft when the guys were still on the board and stuff like that in press conferences. With, I mean, the Cowboys have got a way of doing it, haven't they? And then Ricky Pearsall, going to the 49ers. This was a guy that was kind of has all the kind of physical attributes, but it's whether or not they can kind of put it together. But just another one of these guys that's just a physical monster that goes to the 49ers, and it's well spoken about, isn't it? Where they just want guys that can play multiple positions, and you've seen it with Deebo Samuel, whether he's playing on the line or he's taking the ball at the backfield. But was there anything else in those kind of last few picks that gave you something to think about?
No, I think you've covered them all for me. The two I'd picked out was Terry and Arnold and Adonai Mitchell, and you've mentioned them already. So, yeah, they were the two value picks for me.
Absolutely. John, what about yourself?
No, I mean, I think what happened there is there's probably some surprises with the first round that pushed some players back into that second round that added value into the second round, you know. So just a couple of wee surprises with certain teams going certain ways that then meant that it made that second round a little bit more interesting because the teams start to trade up, etc. I think generally for the first round, the biggest surprise for me is I thought the Patriots would maybe have got more draft capital, maybe gave up Drake May and maybe got more draft capital to use to fill a number of holes in their roster, but that never came to fruition. They've obviously committed to the guy, and that's what they've chose to do. So that was the only real surprise in terms of big changes to how it played out.
I think, just going back to the 49ers, I just wonder now whether they do look to trade either Deebo or Ayuk off there. Now they've got Ricky in. Interesting one. They can't pay all their guys, and they've got like a superstar roster, haven't they? So it'll be interesting to see what happens on that.
Even on the defensive side, Smithy, they're so stacked, and they've got guys that are going to need paid.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, it's somewhere that the Steelers are looking, aren't they, for this big wide receiver, and they just restructured Pat Fryer's deal to try and free up some draft capital, but we're going to have to probably pay Wilson or Fields next season if we do keep them. Both of them are on really small contracts just now, aren't they? So there's something I've got to look out for.
I think the Steelers have got more chance of getting Antonio Brown back than anyone else in that wide receiver. To be honest, I just want to set your expectations, mate. I just want to set your expectations.
I can't wait. And this is just a sign of what's to come, like absolute pure optimism. And then you will see the other side of it in a few weeks' time, right?
You could have seen me when we beat the Dallas Cowboys, and then the realisation hits you need to go and play the 49ers, and you're just like, here we go again. You've seen that San Andreas meme? Here we go again. No, brilliant.
I was just going to say quickly, just before you wrap up, just to wrestle this back from being a Steelers podcast to a Bears podcast, I just want to talk about the Bears' 4th round pick. Right, have you heard about this? The punter.
Yeah.
Was it Williams texting him?
So they took Tory Taylor, right, a punter, and I must admit, when I heard this coming, I was like, what are we doing, take a punter in the 4th round? But the more I've heard about this guy, he is basically the Australian Pat McAfee.
Yeah.
Right, he's the top punter in college football, number one punter. And if you think about it, you do need to win in all three phases of the game. And punting is so important because it drives your field position. And if you can pin a team back within the 20, you've got more chance of them getting a 3 and out and then getting good position back again from the offensive side of the ball. So this guy, right, in 3 years, he had 109 punts that all landed within the 20 in the 20-yard mark. Right, he's literally Scotty Scheffler with his.
Well, this is the thing for me.
He can put it wherever he wants.
This is the thing for me. Because they've got the new rules in, which dictate where the ball should really be going.
Yeah.
So I think that's very key for what they've done there.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a genius move. The more I've learned about it and stuff, and he's a real character as well. Like I say, he's the Australian Pat McAfee they talked to him about. But yeah, I think that's an interesting one. And yeah, Caleb Williams did text him to sort of say like, "You won't be punting much here, pal," type thing. Which I thought was great.
I think there is definitely a wee bit of Bears gaslighting going on here, by the way, because Smithy's just told us it's been the worst draft in terms of quality for decades, and then found a way to finish off by talking about
the best QB, best wide receiver, best punter.
I tell you what, I tell you what.
We got into the 4th round.
We haven't even talked about the picks that weren't even made. So, if you really want to talk about it, right? Montez Sweat, we traded for a 2nd round pick, and we traded Keenan Allen for a 4th round pick. So, like, if you want to add them into their draft, or like the Bears won the draft for me. Sorry, John, but they did.
That's
you know
an
what?
interesting
Not to
point.
joke about it, right? But you got to feel for me because, like, at least we're being spoke about as a serious franchise now. We're getting all the national media news and stuff, and it might all come crumbling down and you take the piss out of us and everything. But I'm loving it at the moment, so I'm not going to shut up about it. So sorry.
That's going to be the
What-
most exciting thing out of this draft is seeing how Caleb Williams and Omadonze actually play. You know, how that link up, because it's the most exciting part of what's
Well, we'll
coming.
find out when we all go to London because we can
That's
go to
it.
the Bears game, obviously. But I honestly thought like they're going to put the Bears on prime time week 1, and it'll be the Packers. But then I forgot you're playing it like Brazil, aren't you? So that's not going to happen. I don't want the Packers first game. Just give us the Panthers or something. Just let us get a couple of wins under our belts first before we start going up against the
Panthers
Packers.
are giving you enough, haven't they? It was the Panthers that you got first round pick off, wasn't it? No.
Panthers have just reshaped the whole roster, mate. Basically,
Yeah. They must be kicking themselves. No, quite interesting. I think that's probably where we'll wrap it up in terms of going around you guys and seeing who won the draft for you, Smithy. I'm not even going to go back there. John, you're going to tell me it's the Steelers, so crack on.
I'm going to say it's between the Steelers and the Bears, to be honest with you. I think the Steelers edge it because it's the Steelers. that's my analysing of it. But I think to the point that I made earlier on, every single one of our picks was significantly predicted to be further up the draft. So I'm really, really pleased with it. In terms of where we had some holes, we've filled the gaps. As I say, I genuinely mean it. If we can get one superstar wide receiver in, all these guys that are arguing and trying to get paid, if we can just hang about outside the room in the hope that one of them come out and we can sign them up, then I genuinely believe that we could be a serious contender next year. Love watching the tape of the guys that we've got on board, and I've not heard much in the terms of like worries or concerns. One guy, the linebacker, Peyton Wilson, has had quite a lot of injuries, and that was the reason why he fell so far back. But there's some guys saying that if he stays fit, he's the best linebacker in the draft. And it's obviously a position that we're quite strong in already. So yeah, for me, Steelers won the draft.
What about yourself, Danzo? You went and picked up a guy with a pretty cool name, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Have the Saints won the draft for you, mate?
No, definitely not. I think for me it was probably the Eagles. It was between the Eagles and the Steelers. We've already had the Steelers, so I'll go the Eagles. Picked up a lot of players with quality at places they needed. Made moves, give ourselves draft capital for next year. I think overall it was a good draft for the Eagles, and they've done what they needed in there.
Two of the top corners taken in the draft. You know, and you just think everything that happened, it literally fell to them, and just seemed to draft well all the time, didn't they?
Yep.
Absolutely. I'm going to go the Vikings. I'm not going to bring the Bears up. I think the Bears have got zero excuses next season. There's zero excuses in Chicago next season if it doesn't go well. But I think what the Bears and what the Vikings and why they won it for me is the setup that they're bringing these young quarterbacks into. I think you've got to feel really confident about the Bears in terms of the setup, and Keenan Allen being, if he can stay fit, quarterback friendly. DJ Moore, again, a guy that can stretch the field and catches the ball in all different phases, short, medium, long. And then, of course, you've got Montez Sweat there, a guy that's going to keep Caleb Williams on the field. But I think the Vikings for me as well, I think when you think of JJ, in terms of Justin Jefferson, that is, not JJ McCarthy, you've got Jordan Addison, they've picked up Aaron Jones and TJ Hawkinson there. They're going to give JJ McCarthy everything he needs to succeed there as well. I think that they might be the kind of the kind of best landing spot for one of these quarterbacks in terms of when you take Caleb Williams out of the equation, guys that maybe need that time to develop. Jaden Daniels or Drake May would love to be going into his situation if they were picked late, and they might not get paid the same money going a little bit later in the draft, but he's certainly going to a better spot. And they've picked up a guy, Dallas Turner, as well. Just when you're thinking of that first round, a guy that was projected to go pretty high, and they've managed to fill that need as well. And I think what makes a big difference for these young guys is going to a franchise with your head coach Kevin O'Connell. You've seen what he done with different quarterbacks there as well. So you've got to think that in terms of mapping, you've got to think that they've come out of the draft kind of overall when you're taking guys that are winners, first and foremost, in JJ McCarthy, but also guys that are in really important positions that can completely disrupt even the best offences. I mean, you've seen that regardless of who Aaron Donald was up against in terms of what quarterback it was or what O-line it was. These guys can completely disrupt it there as well. So I think they've done really, really well in terms of my thoughts. Smithy, are you going to tell us it's the Bears? I'll give you another 30 seconds to ramble on. You're on mute, mate.
That's the Bears season already, isn't it?
Because my dog was barking there. Yeah, I think it's all valid points, but I'm going to say the Bears, of course. I can't see a franchise that has made that much improvement in the space of a couple of months, not just the draft, but free agency. They're a completely different team altogether now. So, yeah, the Bears.
Brilliant. Listen, folks, we are going to be here and during the off-season covering everything NFL. We're going to try and keep you entertained as best we can. I'm sure there'll be some wide receiver contracts to be talking about. I'm sure Smithy will be flying that flag for the Bears, going to the Super Bowl or winning the Super Bowl, at least we've already had John. John to the Steelers are going as well. Danny, me and yourself, a bit more experience in this game when it comes to the disappointment of the NFL there as well. But like I say, we've got some interesting things in the pipeline to kind of get out to you guys. Smithy, I'll hand over to our generational talent when it comes to social media. Number one pick for a bunch of punts when it came to the social media, mate. So I'll let you tell the folks where they can find us going forward.
Yeah, just a reminder, check out the podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and of course on YouTube. And once you listen to the show, please rate the show, like, subscribe, leave us some comments, let us know your thoughts, and share the podcast as well. And then just check out the socials on TikTok and Instagram, at A Bunch of Punts on TikTok, at A Bunch of Punts podcast on Instagram, and we'll continue sort of putting out some entertaining, engaging content for you to get involved in.
Brilliant. Gents, thank you so much for your time, and to everyone that spends the time listening, engaging with us, we really do appreciate it, and we'll see you down the line.